I have that suit on.
You guys hear that? I just don't know where it records to, but we'll figure that out.
What'd you say, Brad?
I said, leave it to you. What suit are you wearing?
What suit am I? I'm wearing a jacket.
Looks really nice.
Here, sucker.
It's a light blue houndstooth jacket. And
That's Matlock right there.
Matt,
And I can confirm he does have pants on today. So we're good.
that's
Oh.
not just basketball shorts.
He's fully dressed.
Yep.
Oh, good.
Well, he's in the office, so I'd certainly hope so.
Brad, did you get the real office today? At
Oh,
your
no,
house?
I've had the real office now for like 2 months.
What?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
looks nice. I haven't seen that.
Yeah,
Nice.
took a year, but you know.
Is that a
I don't know why
whiteboard?
I'm Keelan McQuinn. How do I change it?
I like your banjo too, Keelan. That looks awesome.
That's also Keelan's. Why is my name his name?
I was wondering who was coming in with that name. Okay.
That's just me.
So Chad, you have the paralegal group, the attorney group, and the CES here today. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
And it looks like we have a few people who aren't able to make it. I think Katie's in a farewell something too. So we are recording it so we can share it with others when we are done, but we can go ahead and get started, I would say.
Hey, that sounds great.
I
Can
will
you
get,
give me,
yeah. I can read your mind.
I also fused you.
Oh, I can't read your fuses, just your mind.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so today, as we talk next steps with everybody, I've talked to several of you about some best practices, but I'm gonna go through some of the best practices that were shared, and then feel free to pipe in and I'll call on you, and we're just gonna create a consistent system for everybody across the board. I mean, the number one thing that people appreciate most, or one of the number one things, is just creating consistency. So if we can be consistent as a firm across the board, then there's a huge level of trust. Okay, because I promise you, you may not notice when people are consistent, but you notice the moment they aren't consistent. And so as we talk for a few minutes today about next steps, think about how we can create a consistent experience for everybody. So regardless of what CES they had, regardless of what paralegal or attorney, it's a very, very similar experience. But also keep in mind, we've talked a lot about this in the different groups as we've gone over trainings together, that the number one thing that the brain's wired to do two things. Who's gonna share that for me? Someone just shout it out. Take yourself off mute. What's the brain? Two things. What are they? Brain's wired to do two things.
Pattern discovery.
Close, Keith.
So like conserve energy and survive or something?
Yeah, there you go. Survive and burn as few calories as possible. So in other words, our clients show up, our prospects show up, and they come and they don't want to think. None of us do. We just, we don't want to think. So as we talk about next steps, and as we talk about creating an experience for them, we don't want to create an experience where they have to think a lot, where it just goes, oh, this is the next step, this is the next step, this is the next step. And as I've talked to different members of the team, people that are really crushing it with next steps are people that don't make their clients think very much. That the client just goes, oh, okay, that's what we do. Now, someone answer this for me real quick. I know this is a powerful picture here of a team. Why, when we talk about next steps, is the team element so critical? Just why the team? Why is it that when it comes to next steps, is the team so important?
I would think so. Everybody knows.
Okay,
So
Cheryl, go.
everybody knows what's going on. So everybody's on the same page. Everybody's informed, aware.
right? Raise your hand if you've had an experience where the CES didn't communicate, or the attorney didn't communicate, or the paralegal didn't communicate, and you looked ridiculous. Raise your hand. You had that experience. No one's had that experience? Where all of a sudden you were like, wait a second, you didn't know about this? You didn't know that this was coming, where you have they're set up, and what happens is people are going, wait a second, I don't know what's going on. And so we create this very inconsistent experience for people across the board. So we have to emphasize this team experience, that everyone's on the exact same page. And we'll talk about how that looks and how we can do that more successfully. So, but let's look here for a moment as we take people across the water from where they are to where they want to be. And it starts, the very first thing it starts is in the consult. Okay, why is the consult so important when it comes to next steps? Someone on the CES team, share with me why the consult's so important when it comes to setting people up for next steps.
Because we're the first people that make them aware that there are going to be next steps coming up. So we've got to lay the foundation properly.
So thank you, Keith. So if the CES sets it up right, how much easier does it make it for the attorney? So let me ask you this, Brad, do you know when a CES is set up the next step better than another situation? I'm certainly not calling anyone by name, but do you know when it's been set up from the very onset?
It's very clear. Sometimes, I mean, it's also dependent on the client and what they tell you, I guess, but it can be as clear as the initial case commencement call, where they bring up next steps, or they talk about it. And maybe there's some fine tuning on things, but even most of the time they have a good sense of, you know, what are we going to be doing next in my case for most cases. And that's a big signal to me that, you know, CES has done a good job, at least framing the idea about future legal costs very well.
Yeah, it's huge. Thanks, Brad. That's huge. You can feel like, okay, so the person, now, by the way, from a client journey experience, they feel like, oh, okay, this is very consistent with what I've been set up. But Brad brought up a good point. When the case commencement call is that second step, as we think about the next step experience. Why, Brad, why do you bring that up? Why is that case commencement call so important in creating that path for them?
Because it's the first chance that the attorney has typically to identify what the process will look like, so we can at least start to more accurately forecast what those next steps would be, instead of speaking about them arbitrarily or kind of theoretically. We can be much more tailored to the specific case. So I like to walk clients through the initial just kind of process of what we think would be after the smart start to court, for instance. So we talk about settlement negotiations or mediation, or what litigation would look like. And I'm not necessarily talking about dollars and package costs and all of those specifics, but I'm, you know, letting them know about this path that we're on, and there's going to be factors in your case that determine which path we go down, but it's not just this one stop, you know, and then we're done type of thing. So it's the first chance the attorney has to really forecast those next steps with the client.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, Brad. You say, well, I don't get into money or finances. Why do you not do that? Which, by the way, is brilliant, but why?
Because, I mean, it's sticker shock. I mean, you walk in, if I was going to tell you that you had to pay us $4,500 to go to a mediation, and that's the cheaper option, I mean, like, that's going to scare people away. It would scare me away if I was, you know, first time walking through this with an attorney and didn't know about the process. So just letting the clients know that there is a process, and like letting them know where the clear demarcation line is with Smart Start for court, for instance, you know, ICMC. It's been, because I remember when I wasn't good about that, you know, and those were the cases that then selling the next steps, it was a battle, because then those clients would say, they would either make up something and say, well, you never, you know, I never knew there would be next steps, which I don't know if that's always entirely true, but or they would say, you know, why didn't you better prepare me for this? They seem much more amenable to the prospect of spending more money when they know from, you know, maybe not know how much it is, but they know that they have to expect something at least more than what they've paid already.
Right, right. So your life, so your life got better when you figured that out?
Oh yeah, it was early on, but it was definitely a clear line of the better you, the more, I guess, the more deliberate you are at the initial stages, the initial contact with the client, which, you know, centers around the client, the case commencement call. The more deliberate we are about that, the more meaning, you know, we make a point to do that very explicitly, expressly with them. The less trouble I've had with them down the road, paying for next steps.
That's interesting, you know, and when it comes to money, the attorneys and paralegals, do you want to talk about money?
Nope.
The answer is no. Guess who does want to talk about money? The CES team. And so that's why we worry about, let them deal with all that. You don't ever have to deal with it. But Brad also brings up a great point, is if we're going back with trying to make people think as little as possible, Brad doesn't want them to have to think about money. He doesn't want to make them cause too many things for them to think about. He's just creating the path for them to understand. If he were to add money into the equation, then what does their mind do? What happens to them?
Jumps right there, and they're fixated on it, and they can't process what you're trying to tell them about their case and about where they need to go and what's the best option for their case. Legally speaking, they get tied up on the finances.
That's exactly right. They get caught up in there and they don't. So then it comes back to what Brad brought up here next, is that next step is just communicating along the way. Then once you communicate that to them about the next step, why is an email important? Why do you need to follow up with that email? Why is that so critical in the next step process? This is for anyone to answer.
Can you say what you mean with the email? I mean, I guess
Okay,
it's
that's
a
a
loaded
great
statement. Like,
okay. So
what email? Whose
you've
email?
communicated to them that they're going to need a next step. So you've communicated with them. Then you send a follow-up email, specifically the attorneys. Why is that email so important? And by the way, who's copied on that email?
CES, paralegal.
Okay, the team, yeah, CS, the paralegal, the team is copied on that email. Why is that email so important?
It makes it real. I think, you know, it gives accountability to know, one, that you did it, so that you can go back and make sure that if you're trying to figure out, did I talk to this person about this step, you can clearly see it. And two, it gives the client something to refer back to, so that there's a reminder about this, you know, it's sitting out there. Gives them, you know, a kind of kick in the pants to get moving on it, maybe. But you know, I think it just, for me at least, when I send those emails, it's about just moving it along. Like there's a path that we got to follow, and by making that email, it just knows that now this is the clear line. Now we can go on and, you know, continue the process.
Right, perfect. Cheryl, does that make sense? I know the CES team loves the email. Why? Denise, why do you love the email?
Well, it's clarification. It's prepping for the call that I have to make. I can then quote the attorney. I can say, you know, this is what they think is best for you. And they clearly outline that in the email. I refer to it often when I get one. I'd like to see more of them coming my way. So hopefully after this, we will. It's all about the preparation and the putting the thought in their head so that it's repeated. You know, we're redoing our consult decks to improve that experience as well, and calling things next steps. So we're getting them more prepared even in the consult for it. So every little bit of preparation for them to say yes is wonderful.
And then by the time that we call them, they have already processed, they've had time to think about it, so they may already have a plan in place by the time we get to them.
Yep.
And sometimes we don't even have to call them because they did such a good job that they've went online and they've already did it all themselves. So those are wonderful.
And
It's all
Chad,
it's all about prepping for each other, I think,
Mhm.
you know, and making it each individual jobs easier. Because if you make that simple email, makes our job easier. It also makes your job easier because you don't have to listen to them complain and carry on. And then one of us calling you and complaining and carrying on because the client's screaming at us. It eliminates a lot of time and heartache for a lot of us, not just us.
I also think that if oh, wow. You guys hear that feedback?
Mhm.
I think those emails are important. They're good when they happen. You know, when there's more than one person sending it to somebody. So if there's all three of their team on it, I think there's more accountability. I think they're more likely to engage too, even if they don't want to.
And I was in reference to emails, are we also talking about just the next step notes that are in there as well? Is that kind of the same sense of what we're talking about? Or, I mean, I feel like I can communicate a lot to accounting and a lot to CES in that notes tab of the next step form. That is, I feel like where I've primarily communicated that, and and to Denise's point, I don't always email. I need to email on things more often explicitly, but I try to at least leave some substantive update about where we're at and what kind of conversation I've already had with the client about the next step when I do the next step web form.
Right, and Brad, that's awesome for the CES to reference and be able to see as well. The email just gives a very high level understanding of where we're at and where we're headed. Any other comments about the email before we move on?
The difference too between the email and and putting it in the active files or what will soon be Salesforce is that it goes to the client. And so the client, maybe they heard it, but they probably in that call heard many other things that they're stressed out about. So if that's the main takeaway, it's good to be able to say that. And I think that Keith is right. If you put the paralegal and the CES on it, it's like your whole team knows this is happening. So you're not going to be able to tell the CES like, what? I don't know anything about that. And not that they're lying, and I would assume that their intentions are good, but it also just solidifies for them that this is important.
Kind of like using one parent against the other, you know, same thing.
Well, clients do that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, the more stuff we have in writing, I think the better overall, because it's hard to rebut that when it's sitting there in black and white and you clearly have been told about it. You clearly were explained why and so on and so forth. And then the client can't say those things. It definitely helps a lot to do an email.
Awesome. Okay. Which brings us to the next, after you send the email, fuse the CES. Why? Who's done that before? Why would you send a quick fuse to the CES team? Or sorry, the specific CES individual assigned to the case? Why is that helpful?
I think they just need to know in the moment because they're going to be the next point of personal contact that the client's going to likely have with the firm.
Right.
So just letting them know to expect, you know, a lot of times I'll have that phone call or send that email and then it's just a quick fuse to Christy and say, look, this is what we talked about. Can you reach out to this guy within the next 12 hours, 24 hours? Because I know he's chomping at the bit or he's got, you know, all these things that need to get going and we can't work until he pays us or you know, we can't do our job until they've paid us. So a lot of times I think it's just like, you know, just keeps it moving quickly. It's just a catalyst and then we can, you know, hopefully they can get hired on board and do our jobs as the attorney faster then.
Okay, can I ask a question? When they pay for the next step and the email goes out saying that they've paid for the next step, does a docket go out or how who's the next point of contact when that happens? Does a call get set up or something? When someone's paid for their next step?
Well,
Someone
when
asked me today and I didn't know.
so we get like, so I get an email from Sue that'll say that the package, you know, whatever was sold and they've paid for it.
Yep.
At that point, we docket it, we docket whatever the like the pro law, requirements call for. And then most of the time the case is still flowing, fairly
Okay.
coherent, just kind of the same pace as it was before. So you can just kind of keep on keeping on with the status quo. I don't think it necessarily always necessitates an immediate, call. I think part of the initial docketing for a lot of those packages, though, just does call for a scheduled, phone call or something like that. But, I don't know if there's a uniform answer to that, but I know that more often than not, when we get those, then it just means that we're docketing something, which then whatever you're docketing is getting on a workflow for the legal team.
Okay.
And I love what Brad just said though. And when he said that, I fuse Christy real quick and tell her, hey, listen, this person's chomping at the bit. They really want to get going. That helps Christy out a ton, because then she can go like, oh, okay, I'll call them right now. And it creates, for the client experience, they're going, oh my goodness, this team effort's phenomenal. And so it really helps them and helps us in the long run. So then after the fuse, the CS team runs with it, and then just check in. Just check in with the CS team, that particular member. Hey, where are we at here? Are there any questions? And the CS team checking into with the attorney, so that everyone stays in the loop.
Well, you guys
And
see, they see our notes, right? When we put them in on that smart sheet, like if we're saying they're going to pay on this certain date, you guys see our notes on that, right? So,
Yeah, that's in the packages submitted
Yep.
smart sheet.
okay.
So then it's a very consistent, cohesive experience. So let me just quickly, as we talk about the CS team, look at those lovely pictures there of those individuals. They're committed to clearly articulating those potential next steps. I was listening to one of Christy's calls yesterday where it was phenomenal. She just completely articulated those next steps, and this is what's going to happen. And so the person was like, okay, I'm there, I get it. Brad brought up the case commencement call and how critical that is too, so that it's a very consistent experience across the board. Give the right amount of communication. This is the key as we talk specifically about communication, giving the right amount of communication, referencing the CES, use their name, Keith, Denise, Christy. Why is using their name important? Because it doesn't make them have to.
Then I have to think. And then
with-
when we ask for
Yeah.
a Google review, then they're going to remember our name.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Think about this for a moment. As we talk about simplicity and we talk about people would rather die than think. Think about this example as we're talking about next steps. Just think about this. Costco or grocery store. They have pulled people when they leave. Are people happier leaving Costco or the grocery store?
I like the grocery store because my wife says there's nothing in the grocery store I can't buy, and that makes her feel okay about it.
I like Costco. I'm getting a deal.
They've actually done a poll, and people leaving Costco are significantly happier than people leaving the grocery store.
I believe
that
that. I
interesting?
hate the grocery store.
Because they have to think less. There's less to choose from. This is what
Okay.
you're getting.
Wait, how many items at a grocery store?
Too many.
How many
Yeah.
items at Costco?
Half that.
Half.
Oh, 10th. Okay.
10%. I mean, you go to Costco and you get to buy ketchup. What kinds of ketchup do they have?
Oh, one guy.
Ketchup.
One.
The red
They
kind.
you can buy Heinz small, big, or enormous. That's it. Like when you go to Costco, they're like, we do not want you to have to think. We don't want you to have to go through a lot. And so as we create these emails, don't make people think. I have just a couple quick examples of emails. And then we'll wrap up here. But first, as we look at this first example here, wait, I'm gonna back up here. As we look at these first examples, let me just share a couple quick points. In the email, things that have to happen, why the person needs to have the next step, the point of contact, as we've talked about, referencing them by name. As Keith mentioned, the CES knows what's going on. And as we've talked about before, there's this team. All of this can be established in that email, and people can feel it. So let me just give you a couple quick examples of emails that were really good and move the next step forward. So go ahead, Christy, read this email for us, and then someone share with me why this is such a good email. Go ahead, Christy, given what we've talked about.
Chris, I want to compliment you on how you carried yourself yesterday and the progress we were able to make. Attached is the cliff notes of the agreements reached at mediation. As we discussed, the game plan at this point is we will get a stipulation in order to review from Ms. Shack. Well, I know they mentioned they will also be looking at therapists. It absolutely does not hurt for you to start looking for those as well as a book for Jack about addiction as well. Keith will be the point person for you on any questions you have once the next step service agreement for the review of the J&D gets over to you. It probably presently still processing on our end as I put it in after mediation last night. Have a phenomenal weekend. Best. That must be from Carla.
Okay, well, we're not pointing out any individuals
That's
here.
how he signs his letters.
Okay, well, why was this a good email, Carlo?
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Christy.
He covered everything that you just mentioned in the previous slide. Let's put it that way.
So Keith, you called on this. I don't know if you remember this. I'm just putting you on the spot here.
Oh, yeah, I remember this guy.
Does it make it easier for when Carlos sets it up like this?
Absolutely. But with this client, I'm not sure it made a difference, but yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So the key is just setting it up to where the person goes, oh, okay, it's clearly the next step. Now, by the way, we're never going to bat 100%, but we're going to stack the odds of success in our favor. And so as we look at these emails, understanding that, okay, make it very simple for them to understand. So as we talk about, and as we mentioned after the email, fuse the CES, give them a heads up, let them know that that's going to happen. The CES team will run with it, and then we just check in. And everyone's on the same page. So now it comes to the commitment part of our training and what we're all committed to as a team. Every one of us. I loved what Christy said. Christy said, listen, we're all advocating for each other. We're going to make each other's life better. We're all trying to set each other up for the greatest amount of success. So as we think about this successful next step experience, okay, the first thing, when it comes to the consult, look at the three CES, the CES team. Do you commit to setting up the paralegals and attorneys for the next step process? All of you raise your hand. Look at that commitment. That's a binding commitment. They're excited about that. Then when it comes to the case commencement call, the attorneys will commit to setting up the next step process. The communication across the board will be consistent with the entire team. The email, will everyone commit that's sending the email, all the attorneys here that send the email, you'll commit to follow the steps that we outlined, citing the CES and making it very simple. Raise your hand, attorneys. You could all commit to that. Look at that commitment, that excitement. And then fusing the CES team, letting them know the heads up. The CES team will run with it, and then we will continue to check in and make sure that everybody is on the absolute same page. So does everyone raise your hand if something came up that you thought, yeah, I need to do that a little bit better? Raise your hand if something came up as we were talking that you were thinking, no, Eric, nothing?
You're muted, Eric.
Okay.
Which Eric?
All
No,
of us- Go ahead, Eric.
my only question is why I would send a fuse after I send the email. Like if I
Okay,
just sent
good
if I
question.
just sent the emails to if I just sent the email to everybody, CES, client, paralegal, etc., why would I then muck up the fuse box with more
Eric,
messages with that?
If you just send the email, I'm thrilled with that. Just saying.
Okay.
Because the more communication we can get from you, my love, is we'll take it.
Okay. Eric, can I just real quickly before Denise says something else. Denise, you already made all the comments that you're permitted for.
I'm done.
Brad made a comment that Brad, why do you like sending a fuse after an email?
It provides immediacy, and there can be a back and forth right in the moment. I mean, email is essentially that too, but when we do it, I think it's just kind of like you literally get a little pop on your screen, and there is a immediate ability to have a back and forth quickly about it. Whereas an email, everybody prioritizes their emails and their fuses a little bit differently. We've had this conversation in one way, shape, or form across multiple different types of workflow things. But when it comes to, personally for me, it just gives me an ability to just kind of put a few thoughts together really informally that I can just send to CES, and in keeping Cheryl in the loop to make a little group or just message CES individually. It's just immediacy for me.
And you might want to say something different on the fuse to your CES than you would say with the
That's
client
true.
facing.
Yeah.
But Chad,
This guy's an asshole. Like, don't expect. Yeah.
Right. Right.
would you agree though that that's not, we want the next step to be submitted. We don't want that to be a hang up, like, oh, I don't have time to send an email and a fuse, and so I'm just going to wait to put this next step in. From my perspective, I say put the next step in, and then if you need, if you've got to get on to something else, and you can send the email and or a fuse later, or all you can send is an email and then you've got to jump to the next thing. I think that is better than holding it all up and piling them all up until it's too late.
Huge. Yeah, absolutely, Kelly. Absolutely. I was just saying when Eric, when Brad brought up like, hey, Christy, jump on this guy real quickly. He's going to be available for the next 2 hours, or whatever, just to be able to give a little bit of color, a little more understanding. It helps the CES to go, oh, okay, gives me some more context.
Yeah, so sometimes it might not be 100% necessary to send the fuse as well. But if there is, another comment or something else that you want to add, or just to give them like, hey, this guy's ready to pay now, then that would be good.
Absolutely. And if to Denise's point, if we can get everyone committed to doing the email, that's the absolute start, right step in the right direction. Christy, were you going to make a comment?
No.
I felt like you needed to, so.
No.
Okay, any other comments? Any other comments before we wrap up? The key in all of this is that we're creating a consistent experience for the client. And then I love what Brad said. Brad said his life got significantly better. He didn't give us a percentage. Brad, do you want to give us a percentage of how much better your life got when you started doing it this way?
As it relates to selling next steps, I would say about 50% better.
Wow, 50% better. That's Eric Parker. That's impressive, wouldn't you say?
Yep.
And 4% of that was the fuse. So, that's just saying. So as we all commit to do these things and get those next steps, it will create. And by the way, Brad, doing it, did it create more or less work for you in the long run?
Oh, less. clients. And I'd much rather have like administrative work in front of me than have to deal with a pissy client 2 weeks down the road.
Right. Right. So doing this actually, as we go through this and go, oh, okay, we have to send the email, we do all of these steps. We think initially it's like, oh, that's significantly more work. But as Brad pointed out, it actually made less work for him in the long run. And now we can see Carlo's beautiful face. Carlo,
Chad, can I chime in on the fuse aspect?
Yeah,
Real quick? I don't want to keep.
go ahead.
So I want to echo
No,
first
you're-
what Brad said. I want to echo what Brad said, but also to a degree, I think a lot of it is it helps kind of rein in from the CES perspective. They can kind of get a little more insight, or if they need to chat with us about something in particular, or vice versa regarding maybe how to manage the client, so to speak. Because to Aaron's, I think Aaron kind of said it too. We're not going to say, oh, hey, here's kind of how to manage a client in that email, right? Because the client doesn't want to see that. And we don't want to see the client to see that, right? There's kind of that, how is the sausage made aspect? They don't need to see sometimes. And so that kind of helps us. That fuse serves as the back door. And it also kind of, I think, gives the CES an immediacy. Not necessarily that they need to drop everything and do it right now, but, oh, okay, well, maybe I usually do my calls. I think Christy has told me in the past, there are certain days that Christy does reach out calls, right? Oh, maybe we're past Wednesdays, but I'll make an effort to get to this person on a Friday, or something like that instead.
That's huge. It's huge, Carlo. It creates and it allows people to feel like they're more connected to the firm. It also does, that fuse also increases the team aspect.
Yep.
Because then Christy can know in real time some of the things that, you may add something, Carlo, you may add something, hey, this person's dog just got hit by a car. He's kind of depressed, or whatever. Right. Then Christy's like, oh, Carlo mentioned your dog, and they're like, oh my goodness. And I know that's just a very small thing, but creating things to allow it feel like we're all on one team. Every one of us are on the same team.
Yep.
Love that, Carlo. Any other comments before we wrap up? All I ask is that we do these things and watch what happens. Brad said his life improved by 50%. If your life can improve by 25%, that'd be pretty impressive. I mean, some of you are pretty well maxed out in the enjoyment of life, but even to improve a little bit would be pretty phenomenal. I mean, you think about it. If you that's like going from my haircut to Eric Parker's haircut. You know what I'm saying? That's how much, that's how much your life can improve by doing that. So any other thoughts as we wrap up? Okay, you guys are awesome. We're going to crush this next step thing, and the clients are going to love the experience.
Thanks, Chad.
I think I also am going to try to find a template or create a template and send that out to you guys. So you just have something that's super slick and that you can use and modify and get it out really quickly. Cool. All right.
cool.
Thank you, Chad.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
See
Bye,
you guys.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.